Book of Heaven, Volume 4, by the servant of God Luisa Piccarreta, little daughter of the divine will. Year 1900, page 40–47. November 20, 1900. Since Luisa must live from the heart of Jesus, he gives her rules in order to undertake a more perfect way of living. While I am outside of myself, my adorable Jesus continues to show me my heart inside of his, but so transformed, that I can no longer recognize which one is mine and which one is Jesus's. He has conformed it perfectly to his own. He has impressed on it all the insignia of the Passion, making me understand that, from the moment of his conception, his heart was conceived with these insignia of the Passion. So much so, that what he suffered at the end of his life was an outpouring of that which his heart had suffered continuously. I seem to see one just like the other. I seem to see my beloved Jesus occupied with preparing the place in which he was to put the heart, perfuming it and bejeweling it with many different flowers. And while he was doing this, he told me, "My beloved, since you must live from my heart, it is appropriate for you to undertake a more perfect way of living. Therefore, from you I want 1. Perfect conformity to my will, because you will only be able to love me perfectly if you love me with my own will. Even more, I tell you that by loving me with my own will, you will arrive at loving me, and your neighbor, with my same way of loving. 2. Profound humility, placing yourself, in front of me and of creatures, as the last among all. 3. Purity in everything, because any slightest fault against purity, both in loving and in operating, is reflected all in the heart, and it remains stained. Therefore I want purity to be like dew upon the flowers at the rising of the sun, which, its rays reflecting upon them, transmutes those little drops into as many precious pearls, such as to enchant the people. In the same way, if all your works, thoughts and words, heartbeats and affections, desires and inclinations, are adorned with the celestial dew of purity, you will weave a sweet enchantment, not only for the human eye, but for the whole of heaven. 4. Obedience, which must be connected with my will, because if this virtue regards the superiors I have given you on earth, my will is obedience which regards me directly, so much so, that it can be said that both one and the other are virtues of obedience, with this difference alone. One regards God, and the other regards men. However, both of them have the same value, and one cannot be without the other. Therefore you must love both one and the other in the same way. Then he added, "Know that from now on you will live with my heart, and you must see things the way my heart does, that I may find my satisfactions in you. Therefore be careful, for this is no longer your heart, but mine." November 22, 1900. Jesus puts himself in the place of the heart, and tells her what food he wants from her. My adorable Jesus continues to make himself seen. This morning, having received communion, I saw him in my interior, as well as our two hearts so identified with each other as to seem to be one. My most sweet Jesus told me, "Today I have decided to give you back, not your heart, but myself in its place." At that moment I saw Jesus placing himself in that point where the heart is, and from within Jesus I received respiration and I felt the beating of his heart. How happy I felt, living in this position. After this, he added, "Since I myself have taken the place of the heart, it is appropriate for you to have food always ready to nourish me. This food will be my will, and everything through which you will mortify yourself and of which you will deprive yourself for love of me." But who can say all that passed between Jesus and me in my interior? I believe it is better to keep silent, otherwise I feel as if I would ruin it, since my tongue is not well refined to be able to speak of graces so great which the Lord has given to my soul. There is nothing left for me but to thank the Lord who has looked upon a soul so miserable and sinful. November 23, 1900. How all souls are in Jesus. As I was in my usual state, my loving Jesus transported me outside of myself, and coming out from within my interior, he showed himself so big as to absorb the whole earth within himself, and he spread his magnitude so much that my soul could not find the end of it. I felt dissolved in God, and not only myself, but all creatures were dissolved in him. Oh, how unseemly it appeared, what an affront is given to our Lord, when we, little worms, though living in him, dare to offend him. Oh, if all could see how we are in God! Oh, how careful they would be not to cause him even a shadow of displeasure. Then he became so tall as to absorb the whole of heaven in himself. So, in God himself I could see everyone, angels and saints. I could hear their singing, I could understand many things about eternal happiness. After this, I saw many rivulets of milk flowing from Jesus. I drank at those rivulets, but since I was very limited and Jesus was so big and tall as to have no end, either in magnitude or in height, I could not manage to absorb them all in me. Many of them would flow outside, though remaining in God himself. I felt displeasure, and I would have wanted everyone to run and drink at these rivulets, but so very scarce was the number of the pilgrim souls who would drink. Our Lord too was displeased by this, and he said to me, "What you see is constrained mercy, and this irritates justice more. How can I not make justice, when they themselves constrain my mercy within me?" And I, taking his hands, clasped them together, saying, "No, Lord, you cannot make justice. I do not want it, and since I do not want it, neither do you want it, because my will is no longer mine, but yours, and since it is yours, whatever I do not want, you do not want either. Have you not told me yourself that I must live of your will, entirely and completely?" My sweet Jesus was disarmed by my words, he became small again, and enclosed himself in my interior, and I found myself inside myself. November 25, 1900. The nature of true love is to transmute pains into joys, and bitternesses into sweetnesses. Since my most sweet Jesus delayed in coming, I was almost afraid he would not come. But then, to my surprise, all of a sudden he came and told me, "My beloved, do you want to know when it is that a work is done for one's beloved? When, encountering sacrifices, bitternesses and pains, it has the virtue of changing them into sweetnesses and delights." In fact, this is the nature of true love, to transmute pains into joys, and bitternesses into sweetnesses. If one experiences the opposite, it is a sign that it is not true love that is acting. Oh, in how many works they say, "I do this for God," but then, at some encounters, they draw back. With this they show that it was not for God, but for their own interest and for the pleasure they felt. Then he added, "Generally it is said that one's own will ruins everything and infects the holiest works. Yet, if it is connected with the will of God, there is no other virtue that can surpass this one's own will, because where there is a will there is life in operating good, but where there is no will, there is death in operating, or one operates with difficulty, as though agonizing." December 3, 1900. The nature of the Most Holy Trinity is formed of most pure, most simple, communicative love. This morning, as I was outside of myself, I found myself with baby Jesus in my arms. And while I delighted in looking at him, I don't know how, from the same baby a second came out, and after a few instants, a third baby, both of them similar to the first, though distinct among themselves. Stupefied in looking at this, I said, "Oh, how one can touch with hand the sacrosanct mystery of the Most Holy Trinity, that while you are one, you are also three." It seemed to me that all three of them spoke to me, but as the word came out, it became one single voice. Our nature is formed of most pure, most simple, communicative love, and the nature of true love has this of its own. It produces from itself images fully similar to itself in power, in goodness, in beauty, and in everything it contains. And only to give more sublime prominence to our omnipotence it places the mark of distinction, in such a way that, melting in love, this nature of ours, which is simple, with no matter at all which might prevent our union, forms three persons, and returning to melt, it forms one. It is so true that the nature of true love has this prerogative of producing images fully similar to itself, or of assuming the image of the beloved, that the second person, in redeeming mankind, assumed the nature and the image of man, and communicated the divinity to man. While they were saying this, I could distinguish my beloved Jesus very well, recognizing the image of the human nature in him, and only because of him I had the confidence to remain in their presence. Otherwise, who would have dared? Ah, yes. It seemed to me that the humanity assumed by Jesus had opened commerce for the creature, so as to let her ascend up to the throne of the divinity to be admitted to converse with them, and to obtain deeds of graces. Oh, what happy moments I enjoyed! How many things I understood, but in order to describe something, I would have to describe it when my soul is with my dear Jesus, as she seems to be set free from the body. But as I find myself imprisoned again, the darkness of the imprisonment, the distance of my mystical son, the pain of not seeing him, render me incapable of describing it, and make me live dying. Yet, I am forced to live, fastened, imprisoned in this miserable body. Ah, Lord, have compassion for a miserable sinner who lives infirm and imprisoned. Break soon the wall of this prison, that I may fly to you and come back no more. December 23, 1900. Before the sanctity of the divine will, passions do not dare to come forward, and lose life by themselves. After going through long days of silence between blessed Jesus and me, I felt a void in my interior. This morning, on coming, he told me, "My beloved, what do you want to tell me that you so much yearn to speak with me?" And I, feeling all ashamed, said, "My sweet Jesus, I want to tell you that I ardently yearn for you and for your holy volition, and if you concede this to me you will make me fully content and happy." And he added, "In one word you have grasped everything by asking me for what is greatest in heaven and on earth, and I, in this holy volition, yearn and want to conform you more to it. And so that my volition may be more sweet and enjoyable for you, place yourself in the circle of my will, and admire its different qualities, by pausing now in the sanctity of my volition, now in the goodness, now in the humility, now in the beauty, and now in the peaceful dwelling that my volition produces. In these pausings you will acquire ever more new and unheard of news about my holy volition, and you will become so bound to and enamored of it, that you will never go out again. This will bring you a highest advantage, because being in my will, you will have no need to fight against your passions and to be always at arms with them, for while they seem to be dying, they are born again more strong and alive. But rather, without fighting, without clamor, smoothly they die, because before the sanctity of my will, passions do not dare to come forward, and lose life by themselves. And if the soul feels the movement of her passions, it is a sign that she does not make a continuous dwelling in the boundaries of my volition. She makes some exits, some little escapes into her own volition, and is forced to smell the stench of a corrupted nature. On the other hand, if you remain fixed in my will, you will be completely trouble-free, and your only occupation will be loving and being loved by me in return. After this, as I looked at blessed Jesus, I saw he had the crown of thorns. I removed it very gently, and I placed it upon my head. He drove it onto me and disappeared, and I found myself inside myself with an ardent desire to remain in his most holy will.